So what are we talking about today?
What? World building?
Yes! So how do you start when you build a world?
The best thing that I've found so far is to come up with a compelling idea for why your world exists.
So like a kernel of an idea and essentially build from there.
Yeah.
So that's all we need, right?
Because right now, you have thousands of iterations of different worlds.
Right.
If you're not going to write a world that is different than the other ones,
Why not just use that one?
somebody else's world.
And build a cool story in that one. But if you're going to build from the ground up, we should start with a kernel of an idea.
Yep.
So let's get an example. So you're running our campaign right now. What did you start with?
I was reading through the 5th edition DMG.
Okay.
And one of the things it said was, here are all the core tenets of the world. And I said, and later, like 2 pages after that, after I had my idea, it said, oh, now to change your world up, try one of these ideas. But
you already had it.
I had already had it, yeah. So I started off with, okay, normally you have these 10,000-year-old worlds where elves live for 1,000 years without batting an eye.
And they have ruins.
And there are ruins of
ancient
long-lost
civilizations.
races and long-lost religions. And so you have a lot of leeway with who you can introduce and why you can introduce them. And
right, and you have a rich history that you can build or pull from.
What if the world only existed for 500 years?
Start from the beginning, essentially.
People didn't have 10,000 years of animosity built up towards other people. You didn't have, like, particularly well-established anything. Government systems were still being created, and, like, ruling classes were not concrete yet.
You didn't have 5,000 years of inbreeding or wars or angst.
Right, exactly. You had maybe 500 years where 200 years ago everything was different. So where does a world go like that?
So essentially, instead of us playing in the 3rd chapter, we start at 1.
Yeah.
Or even 0.
You start at page 0 and...
we're telling the origin story almost.
Instead of having storybooks full of legends, you have like 8 big stories. Everyone has a couple heroes that they look up to, but there's not 10,000 heroes who have been lost already.
See, I approach my world building almost exactly the same. I have my kernel of idea, and that's what I begin with. Mm-hmm. So in most recent campaign, I really wanted to create my own race, or not race, but more class called the Televexen. Essentially, I wanted Jedi.
Okay.
And so if you had a Jedi in this world, what would it be good at? Well, you would use them to kill big monsters.
Right.
So if this particular class, they're Jedi, they're samurai, they're good at killing dragons. They killed all of the dragons early on. As soon as they were a problem, they killed them. So what happens next?
Yeah. They were really good at killing dragons. They killed all of the dragons.
Exactly, and where does that go? So that creates a race of wandering warriors that are good at one thing, and that one thing doesn't exist anymore. And that's where I built the world from. The next step, essentially, after the kernel, in my opinion, and I believe yours is the same, is you then have to have the playground for them to play in.
Yeah.
So you build the sandbox, and that would start with geography.
Yep.
So how do you do that? How do you develop a map?
I took probably 2 full weeks just trying to figure out. I took all of the races that were in the player's handbook, said, okay, I want everything included in this. So why would this race exist? And just slowly built it out.
Like, if they evolved from this place, why would it be?
Yep. I want this type of terrain, who would live there and why?
Right.
I want this type of terrain, who would live there and why? And slowly you start seeing, I need all of these different types of things and these different places. And slowly you build outward and outward and outward. And you have this rich tapestry of things that exist because there's a reason to have them.
Right.
Not because, I have to include this type of thing because it has to exist.
Exactly. No, you want a reason for it. And I know we make it sound like it's going to take forever, and it does, but it lets you then have this playground for everyone to play in, and it makes DMing or GMing way easier.
So much easier.
Because first thing we do is we build a map. Why we have the map, as we just explained, and then we go to what is then in that map.
Yeah.
So once you have the terrain, so you have a mountain here, you have a forest here, there's an ocean, there's a continent, there's a country, you have that. Now, what is in those particular areas? Like you said, what do you populate it with? Not just societies, not just people, but flora, fauna.
Yeah.
If you're in a mountain, you're not going to have, tropical trees. You're not going to have coconut trees. Unless you do, why?
Right.
So then you build in, what are the monster encounters? What people live there? Yeah. So my example I always use is, okay, so my team lands on a mountain. That was not at all planned for.
Right.
They were supposed to steal the diamond and then leave and go to their hideout. Instead, they stole a ship with lots of diamonds on it and flew it to a mountain.
Right.
Well, now what do? The player goes left when you wrote right. But if you have the playground for them to play in, you roll a die and go, and you look at your little, bestial encyclopedia that you put together.
It'll still take you like 30 seconds to flip to your page and say, okay, you're here at this time, you're this level. Oh, okay, you fight this.
Exactly.
Instead of, wait, you're going where? Wait,
let me make a Google search.
You blew up the orphanage? What?
Exactly. So if you have those building blocks in place, you then can open up their world along with yours. So then you can roll the dice, say, okay, a dragon shows up or a harpy, whatever you have in that area. You
take some pressure off of yourself and kind of give your players this picture that they are actually in a world that is different. And that's one of the coolest things that I found because as you know, I hosted a one-shot for some new players in the same world that you're playing in. Right,
and you now have everything that's happened with us.
Right. It was 100 years before your party.
Right.
But now there's a story that exists that I didn't write on my own. So I don't know, I didn't write everything to be as it was.
Right.
I said, oh, these are some encounters they'll face, but how do they face them? Do they just murder hobo their way through it, or do they talk it out, or what happens? And now there are a couple interesting things that have happened from them that aren't necessarily going to find their way to you.
But if they
do, then I have this backstory that exists outside of my imagination and outside of your imagination.
Exactly. It came along naturally, essentially. George R.R. Martin actually writes like that. He'll DM a campaign, or they'll create a role-playing game. Then he'll pull characters and go, that was cool how that happened. Maybe I can write a little bit like that. Pull that as inspiration. I did the same thing with one of my campaigns. I wrote this big, long, huge epic, and the characters essentially incited a war between gods. It's like, but that was the end of their campaign. So then the next time I DM'd, I was like, I'm going to set in this world. Are you guys interested? Sure. Okay. It's 1,000 years after all this happened. So there's this rich history now that I didn't have to write. Exactly. They did this. And if you play with the same players, if you slip in an Easter egg here, or if they're finding their way back to an area, like my friend Dave, he accidentally incited this giant god to come down and start a fight with the Dragon Queen. Yep. The Dragon Queen used magical fire and killed an entire half of a continent with fire. Now that's a desert.
Yep.
And when you show, it's like, oh, why is there nothing that grows here? Because of this magical fire that I didn't even have to write. It just happened.
And that's, I think, the coolest thing, because when you can create one world and get away with using it forever.
Right.
Because if you create this world yourself and you know every intricacy of it, you now have leeway to say, okay, we're fast forwarding 10,000 years. We now have airships and guns and all of this new technology, but this is where it came from.
Right.
There's still this rich backstory that already exists, so you can write into anybody's wheelhouse without having to sit down, create an entirely new story.
Right.
Because especially if you're writing things like your own religion system.
Exactly.
And
deities.
It's okay, why are these deities different than the normal deities? Because,
exactly.
Once again, you don't want to put in the time to create a system that already exists and just put a different name there and it's different.
Right. And then also, if you do that, it's like an extra 20 hours of prep work, yes. But then you can simplify it later on where you don't have to spend 2.5 hours. Oh crap, what are we going to do on Sunday? Let them decide. You are prepared.
Yep.
And that makes them mutual writers with that world, it makes your job easier. It lets you play more.
Yep. It
with
also
that
lets
world.
you. Oh, we just finished our game that I prepped for 2 weeks for, but I'm going to be here for 9 days.
Right. So, but now we can play as many sessions as you want
Right.
because you're prepared.
Because I need 2-3 hours maybe total to set up everything. But
Right.
After that, we
good to
can
go.
just go back down.
Exactly. And honestly, that's where we'll leave you. That's how you build a world, in our opinion, at
Yeah.
least. That's how we do it. You don't have to do it our way.
And that's just the base structure. But
Exactly. There's more to it. Let us know in the comments below what you do to build a world. If you
How
have
we're
questions,
wrong.
yeah, definitely tell us how we're wrong. If we're wrong, though, come on, let's be honest here. Let us know what you think in the comments below. We're the Cave Trolls, and we're out.